Welcome, everyone. I'm Richard Herskowitz, the Artistic Director of AIFF, and we have with us the Director of Medicine Man, the Stan Brock Story, Paul Michael Angell. Hi, Paul.
Hello there, hi.
And the producer, Vladimir Daniel. Did I pronounce that right? Daniel or Danielle?
Daniel, but I'll take either.
Okay.
How you doing? Nice to be here.
Thanks to both of you for coming and sharing your wonderful film. So, I mean, Stan Brock is an amazing character, and I just want to hear about just how you developed this portrait. Maybe we could take it back to the beginning. Paul, how did you first encounter Stan Brock?
Well, it was 2011, and I was looking for a film about a person that somehow encapsulated a social issue. And a friend suggested I read an article in the Sunday Times in London. And it was about a British guy who had left the United States after the war, a incredible life running the world's largest cattle ranch, before being discovered by some US TV producers who took him to America, put him in first wildlife TV series. And then he had something of a change in life. He decided to sell all of his worldly goods, take everything he had and create a charity delivering free healthcare to those in remote areas that were most in need, and never take a salary ever again in his life. So something of a modern day medical monk, if you like. Mm-hmm. This is absolutely true as a story. Now, that is not even to consider that what happens later to this organization is they don't just focus on remote developing world areas. By the early 90s, they start to focus on parts of the United States where people are really struggling to get access to decent medical services. Mm-hmm. So Stan begins to run clinics in the US in Hancock County, Tennessee, 1991. And the story really goes from there. And here we are in 2021, and Stan's organization, Remote Area Medical, have run over 1,000 clinics, delivered over $120 million of free healthcare to over 1 million patients, and they are the largest organization of their type in the United States. So I just thought this is perfect for a documentary feature film. And I was very lucky that Stan decided to go ahead and do a film of this nature with us.
So Vladimir, when did you become involved?
Yeah, so I came along a little bit later. It was really by chance that I got involved with the project. My background's actually in corporate finance, and I met Paul quite fortuitously, I guess, and he was telling me about this incredible story he was working on and how he needed a bit of support to get the film, packaged up and finished and, effectively out to audiences. So I thought, if there's anything that I can do to help with that, I would love to do so. So I got involved probably about 4 years ago and brought some of the skills that I've got from my previous industries to the production. And we've been able to luckily get a great investor on board, Wael Kabani, who's from our Big Dream Films, our co-production company, that has helped us, get the film through various stages of production. We've managed to attract some great great crew to the project, such as our editors, Tim Beast and Katie Bry. We've got Douglas Blush, who's come on board as a consulting editor and now co-producer, and many others. And yeah, it's just a great project to be part of, because as Paul says, as much as it's highlighting a very important subject in the US, it's also just a great story to be part of and really inspirational.
Yeah. So Paul, I want to hear some more about how did you approach Stan and convince him to be the subject of your film?
Well, immediately after reading the Sunday Times article, it was Sunday night, and I thought, I'm just going to Google these people and call the office straight away. I call the office and a deep British sonorous accent responds. Hello, remote area medical, Stan Brock speaking. And I think to myself, oh, you know, this guy is for real. He walks the walk and he talks. He doesn't just talk the talk. Mm-hmm. He's in there Sunday night, personally answering the phones. So that really reinforced my belief that there was a really quirky, interesting, quaint, charming character at the core of this story that people could really engage with. Mm-hmm. So during the call, I say, wow, read this article. I'm so inspired by your story. I'd love to make a film about your life. And Stan says, well, actually, we're assessing that. I've had a bit of exposure and there's been a few filmmakers that have approached us. So we have some options and can you write something up? So we did that. And eventually Stan chose us. And we're very fortunate, you know, to be chosen, not the most experienced people to throw their hat in the ring.
What do you think he saw in you? What do you think he saw in you that led him to choose you?
Partly the British connection, maybe.
That occurs to me.
We were small, and I think I made it clear that we had a kind of DIY ethos about the way that we were going to be working. And maybe in some way that mirrored the way that remote area medical was created, with that great kind of can-do spirit that they all had in 1985. I don't know. It's certainly very interesting to have the honor of making a life story about somebody who is 40 years older than you. Mm-hmm. I'll say that.
Yeah. So how much did you know about the American healthcare system and crisis? And again, somebody coming from a country that has a national health system, I mean, you know, how were you aware of the issues in this country with healthcare? And
yes,
yeah.
Generally speaking, I was aware through the media. I had never been to United States before 2012. So the first shoot and the opening scene of the movie is the first time in Sacramento, is the first time I had ever stepped on US soil. I knew that people were struggling. I think when I read the article about Stan, I'm not sure I was aware of pop-up field hospitals. In any case, what really surprised me when I arrived in Sacramento in 2012 to film was that when I spoke to people, they would talk of these big ticket prices they had to pay for treatments if they didn't have insurance through their employer. $4,000 to $5,000 for a broken arm if you go to ER, $900 just to register at a doctor's practice. And somebody said that if they were to get cancer, that they would be looking at, you know, $80,000 to $100,000 in co-payments with their coverage. Those figures really hit me hard as somebody who comes from a universal free healthcare system in the United Kingdom, where you can always think that if something cataclysmic happens to me in my life, that system will be there as a safety net. I will get some of the best cancer treatments in the world, or road traffic injury treatments in the world. Mm-hmm. I thought it's not kind of fair to have the American people, a lot of the American people, some say 35 to 50 million of the American people, living in a situation where they can't sleep at night because they're worried that something cataclysmic like that could happen to them and there'd be nowhere to go.
Yeah. Well, you've made a really powerful advocacy film and really served Stan Brock's mission, I think. And so thank you for that. What I'm amazed. I know that your background prior to this film was primarily as a shooter, also a producer, right? But were you involved in the shooting of this film? I forgot to check that credit.
What? That's fine. Yeah, I'm one of the camera operators. I probably only shot like 20% of the film. I'm not largely responsible for the shooting.
I just think the editing is fantastic. And I'm really curious about how you've drawn this portrait of this exceptional human being, and the way his character is unveiled in the course of the film is so exceptional. It's such a surprise to find out gradually who this person was as a celebrity, because it just does not, it's just so unexpected. So can you talk about how you developed the really the structure of this portrait?
Yeah, I think in the first instance, we kind of knocked the emotional story into shape, first of all, like i.e. Stan's internal emotional story. Mm-hmm. And once we understood that, and once we'd laid that out before ourselves, it allowed us to have a greater understanding and kind of manipulate it in a way that wouldn't be destructive to its power, but would allow us to bring in other elements whilst maintaining its power. Mm-hmm. So that's when we start to bring in all the clinic stuff. That's when we do crazy stuff like have a montage of presidents that covers 100 years of healthcare history in the United States. Mm-hmm. And the watchword for us when bringing in those elements was definitely flow, mm-hmm. where we had to have the flow, or else the cutting between kind of 3 different strands would have been a lot to take, I think. Mm-hmm. And the other watchword, can I have 2 watchwords? The other watchword was reveals. We realized that with the story with a personal history such as Stan's that was so rich and diverse, don't serve it up straight away. Try to drip feed that information as much as possible and keep the Stan intrigue going.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Richard, sorry, it's interesting that you picked up on that point, because I think that's one of the fundamental challenges of making a film like this, where it's got so many different elements and you have to balance them throughout the narrative in a way that's actually watchable. So, for any aspiring filmmakers out there, as much as coming across a subject like Stan is a huge opportunity, it's actually incredibly challenging to coherently portray the full richness of that story to the audience. And that's why we had such a complex edit and so many people actually involved in that, because everyone brought a slightly different take to it, and finally it came together. Yeah. But yeah, it's really tough. It's where documentaries like this are made, I think, especially when you've got tons of archive and you've got lots of your own footage and all these different themes.
Yeah,
I mean, for those that think the film is a clever arrangement, it's simply the only permutation that works.
I feel like if you had revealed his celebrity too earlier, it would have made the audience more skeptical about the humanitarianism or whatever. I mean, I feel like you held it back, and that was a really, really smart choice.
Yeah, Stan, frankly, I don't think Stan was ever like box office enough to make a huge deal out of his fame. And then sort of paradoxically, if he were that famous, then the audience would have that foreknowledge anyway. So I suppose it seems like the only logical solution to drip feed that and kind of show that he definitely tasted that world, but it was not ultimately fulfilling for him, and it's one of the inciting factors in his change of life.
I'm imagining, and I know this was 8 years in production, which is not uncommon in independent features. The archival research, the archival research must have been, there was so much of it. So much of his life is documented. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The archival research. I mean, everybody's responsible for archival research on this team. My grandmother, my dog, but we have somebody
Alex Dan, who's the archive researcher.
Yeah, it's the associate producer, Alex Zidan, who has been, like Google Alerts, that's like a bot that can trawl all information on the internet and email you daily with its latest finds. Well, he's kind of like Google Alerts on steroids. He's just way beyond that. And since 2011, he's been harvesting various Stan Brock related assets fervently in a basement. So without people with the passion for the story, but then the actual ugly work as well of tunneling into research, you can't, I don't think you can pull one of these independent documentary feature films off.
Mm-hmm. I think also the quite interesting story that kind of happened towards the back end of the edit, which kind of just goes to show you how unpredictable these things can be. As much as we had years worth of archival research and thought we'd found everything there was to find, it was actually, you know, within a few weeks of what we thought was going to be the end of the final edit, that a whole drive full of footage just, you know, kind of got dropped on us by the Tennessee, what's it called? The Tennessee TAMIS.
The Tennessee Museum of Moving Image and Sound. So that would be propped to Eric Dawson et al. The organization.
And basically we had a huge gap at the time, which was really problematic, which was between Stan kind of finishing the film career in the mid-80s to when we started filming, or at least when the media started to really get noticed, you know, noticed Ram in the mid-2000s. And, you know, this drive kind of dropped, which was all effectively early home video footage shot by volunteers of Stan in the early planning missions, of the early expeditions to Mexico, some of the local news coverage that aired at that time, which had, you know, been lost to the internet. And that just goes to show you, we thought, okay, we've got to come up with ways to somehow edit around this big hole. The next thing you know, fortuitously, this thing just drops on us, and suddenly we've got a whole other phase of the edit we need just to kind of go through that and figure out how to treat it. So there's no sure things really, but even when it comes to archival research, you know.
So you've finished this incredible project, and now where does it go from here? Actually, both I'm curious about remote area medical after Stan Brock and your movie from this point forward.
I think remote area medical have gone from strength to strength in the last couple of years. They're doing more clinics than ever before, pre-COVID. And during COVID, they have run testing centers in various states. Correct me if I'm wrong, Vladimir, New York State, there was testing.
They did it in other states, yeah. New York was one of them.
And now they've moved on to doing COVID vaccinations. And is that correct?
Yeah, they do vaccines, yeah.
That has, I know that was in the pipeline, and that is now being implemented. And they're now headed up by a CEO called Jeff Eastman, who's very experienced and in his career, but particularly with remote area medical, is somebody who's a volunteer, who's been there for many years. So it's nice that that kind of like family tradition is understood and continues through the work of Jeff Eastman.
And now, what are the plans for the distribution of Medicine Man?
Well, in terms of distribution, I mean, like any of these films, it's very difficult to get them noticed and get them out to a broad audience. But that's firmly our aim, not just from a commercial standpoint, but also because, as Paul's highlighted, the organization still exists, the need still exists. And in fact, from what we're hearing from remote area medical, the need is increasing since the pandemic started. So it's just about finding a distributor that can really get this film out to as broad an audience as possible, so people can get an idea of what is actually happening on the front lines of a system that's failing, and also hopefully be inspired by the example of somebody that shows you just what you can achieve. You know, if you keep plugging away and you keep putting yourself out there. And that doesn't just go for a distributor to get it out to these people, it also goes to people that will tell their friends about the film. It goes to people with influence that will want to post about it on social media. It goes to, you know, anybody can make a difference, frankly, by saying you should really watch this film because you'll be inspired and hopefully you'll learn something. So that is our plan, by screening it at festivals like Ashland and, you know, getting the good people of Oregon and the United States and the world over to see what it's all about.
We'll do all we can to help spread the word. Thank you both for joining us and for your wonderful film.
Thanks very much, Richard.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for having us at the festival.
Thank you.